There are smiles that can destroy empires. Charlotte had no idea hers was such a dangerous weapon. When she walked into that boardroom with a simple tray of coffee, she didn't expect to hear her boss's deep voice cutting through the silence. "If you smile like that again, I'm going to lock that door and show you what happens when you make me lose control." Bruce wasn't just her millionaire boss. He was a man on the edge, fighting against a desire that threatened to consume everything. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and become a member to get early access to upcoming stories. And if you felt it was really worth listening to, click the super thanks button too. Your support makes all the difference and helps us keep bringing you stories that move you. The morning came through the wide windows of the 40th floor like a silent promise. Charlotte balanced the coffee tray with her usual delicacy, her steps light on the grey carpet that muffled any sound. She had no idea this would be the day everything changed, that this simple gesture, walking into the boardroom with a discreet smile on her lips, would detonate something that had been building for months. Bruce Ashford stood with his back to the door, his impeccable silhouette outlined against the panoramic view of Manhattan. The navy blue suit fell perfectly over his broad shoulders, and even without seeing him from the front, Charlotte could feel the authority that emanated from him like an invisible force. He was the kind of man who didn't need to speak loudly to be heard. He just had to exist. She entered quietly, as she always did. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee, mixed with the woody cologne that always hung in that space, an expensive masculine fragrance that made her think of winter nights and crackling fireplaces. Charlotte placed the cup on the polished mahogany table, careful not to make any noise. But it was when she lifted her eyes that she felt it. Bruce had turned around, and he was watching her. It wasn't his usual professional gaze, that quick, polite, almost indifferent one. This was something completely different, intense, hungry, as if he'd been waiting for this moment his entire life, and now, finally, he was letting the mask fall. Charlotte froze. Her heart raced so fast she was certain he could hear it. Her fingers were still on the tray's handle, but she couldn't move, couldn't look away. Bruce closed his laptop with a soft click, unhurried. Every movement was calculated, deliberate. He tilted his head slightly, his dark blue eyes fixed on her with an intensity that burned. Then, with his voice low and deep, so low that Charlotte had to concentrate to understand every word, he said, "If you smile like that again, Charlotte." He paused. The silence filled the space between them like an electric current. "I'm going to lock that door and show you what happens when you make me lose control." The air left her lungs all at once. She blinked, trying to process what she'd just heard. This was Bruce Ashford, her boss, the ruthless CEO who conducted meetings with surgical precision, who never showed emotion, who maintained a respectful distance from everyone around him. But the man in front of her wasn't that person. This was someone different, someone whose eyes gleamed with something dark, dangerous, irresistible, someone who, in that instant, didn't care about rules anymore. I don't understand," Charlotte managed to murmur, her voice trembling. Bruce took a step forward, then another. He moved like a predator, confident, patient, inevitable. The distance between them shrank until she could feel the heat radiating from his body. He stopped just inches away, so close that Charlotte had to lift her face to meet his eyes. "You don't understand," he repeated, his voice even lower, almost a hoarse whisper. "Charlotte, you have no idea, do you?" She shook her head, speechless. Bruce raised his hand slowly, giving her enough time to pull back. But she didn't pull back. She couldn't. His fingers touched her face with a gentleness that contrasted brutally with the tension in the air. He brushed away a strand of chestnut hair that had escaped from her bun, tucking it behind her ear with almost reverent care. "Every time you walk into my office with that smile—" He paused, his eyes traveling over her face as if memorizing every detail. "I have to hold myself back from pulling you to me." Charlotte's world spun. She felt her legs weaken, but his hand was already at her waist, firm, holding her steady. The touch sent waves of heat through her entire body. She took a deep breath, trying to stabilize herself, but only managed to breathe in his scent, that aroma that haunted her in the hallways, in meetings, in dreams she would never dare admit. "How long?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Months," Bruce admitted, his eyes still locked on hers. "Since the first day you walked into this office and asked me if I wanted sugar in my coffee. You smiled, and I lost my footing." Charlotte felt tears burning in her eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. It was the intensity of it all, the revelation, the raw truth he was laying before her. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" she whispered. "Because I'm your boss. Because you deserve more than a man like me. Because—" He closed his eyes for a moment, as if fighting with himself. When he opened them again, there was a vulnerability in them that Charlotte had never seen. "Because I'm afraid of what would happen if I really had you." She swallowed hard. Her breathing was uneven, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it wanted to burst from her chest. But amid the chaos inside her, a certainty began to form. "What if I told you," Charlotte began, her voice still trembling but steady, "that I feel this too?" Bruce's eyes widened for a fraction of a second. Then something changed in them, a spark, a promise. "Then," he said, his rough voice heavy with restrained desire, "everything changes." He was still holding her face, his thumb caressing the line of her jaw with a softness that made her tremble. Charlotte placed her hand over his, feeling the firmness, the warmth, the reality of this moment. "Bruce," she began, but didn't know how to continue. He leaned in so slowly that every second felt like an eternity. His lips were millimeters from hers, his warm breath brushing against her skin. Charlotte closed her eyes, waiting, wanting. But he didn't kiss her. Instead, he whispered against her lips so low it was almost a promise. "Dinner, tomorrow night. Let me show you who I really am. Then, you decide." And then, before she could respond, he pulled away. The absence of his touch was like a vacuum, leaving her there, trembling, confused, completely disarmed. Bruce walked back to the desk, picked up his laptop and headed to the door. Before leaving, he looked back one last time. 8 o'clock. I'll pick you up." And then he was gone, leaving Charlotte alone in that room, her heart still racing, her body still vibrating with the memory of his touch. What had she just agreed to? Charlotte didn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Bruce's face. The intensity of that look, the way his fingers had touched her skin, the promise whispered against her lips. She tossed and turned in bed until dawn, her heart oscillating between excitement and fear of the unknown. When she arrived at the office the next morning, everything seemed different. The same grey walls, the same quiet hallways, but now they carried a new weight. An expectation that pulsed in the air like electricity before a storm. She avoided his office all morning. She prepared reports, answered calls, pretended to be too busy to think. But it was useless. Every passing minute increased the tension growing inside her like a rope being stretched to its limit. At 3 in the afternoon, the phone on her desk rang. The display showed Bruce Ashford, CEO. Charlotte took a deep breath before answering. "Yes, Mr. Ashford?" There was a pause on the other end. Then that deep voice that now haunted her. "My office. Now." The tone wasn't rude, but there was something in it, an urgency, a need, that made her stomach turn. She stood up, smoothed her skirt, checked her reflection in the computer screen. Then, with steps that felt heavier with each meter, she walked to his office door. Charlotte knocked twice. "Come in." She turned the handle and pushed the door open. Bruce was standing by the window, hands in his pockets, his posture relaxed but his shoulders tense. When he saw her, he turned completely around. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They just looked at each other, two strangers who suddenly needed to relearn how to be in each other's presence. "Close the door," Bruce said, his voice low. Charlotte obeyed, the click of the lock echoing louder than it should have. When she turned around again, he had moved closer. Not completely, but enough that she could feel the change in the air. "You didn't sleep," he observed. It wasn't a question. "How do you know?" Charlotte asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Because I didn't sleep either." He took another step. "I spent all night thinking about what I said yesterday, thinking about whether I made a mistake." Her heart sank. Was it a mistake? No. The answer came quick, definitive. But it should have been. He was closer now. Close enough that Charlotte had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. His eyes were contained storms, dark, deep, full of unspoken things. Charlotte, I spent months building barriers, convincing myself that what I feel for you is just professional admiration. Respect. He shook his head, a bitter smile touching his lips. But yesterday, when you walked into that room smiling like that, as if the world were a good place, all the barriers crumbled. She swallowed hard. And now? Now. Bruce raised his hand slowly, giving her time to pull away, but she didn't pull away. His fingers touched her chin, tilting her face upward. Now, I need you to understand something. What? She whispered. I'm not the man you think I am. Her eyes widened. What do you mean? Bruce released her face and took a step back, running his hand through his dark hair in a gesture of frustration. For the first time since Charlotte had known him, he seemed vulnerable. You see me here in this office running meetings, closing deals. You think you know Bruce Ashford, the CEO? He turned to her, his eyes shining with something that looked like pain. But that's just one part of me. A diluted version. Then show me the real version, Charlotte said, her voice surprisingly firm. He stared at her for a long moment, as if evaluating whether she really wanted this. Then, slowly, he walked toward her again. This time he didn't stop until he was right beside her, so close their bodies almost touched. The real version, he murmured, his voice hoarse, is a man who stays awake at night thinking about you, who has to hold his hands under the table during meetings to keep from reaching for you, who looks at you and sees everything. Charlotte felt the air escape her lungs. Her entire body vibrated with his proximity. I see the way you bite your lip when you're focused, Bruce continued, his eyes traveling over her face. The way you laugh, that genuine laugh that makes everyone around you smile too. The way you care about people, even when they don't deserve it. He raised his hand again, this time letting his fingers slide along the side of her neck, so gently it was almost torture. And I see the way you look at me, he whispered, as if I were more than all of this. Charlotte's legs trembled. She placed her hand on the desk behind her to steady herself, but Bruce followed, placing both hands on the desk, one on each side of her body, trapping her without touching her. Tell me I'm wrong, he murmured, his face inches from hers. Tell me I'm imagining things and I'll stop right now. Charlotte looked into his eyes, those eyes she secretly studied during meetings that made her lose focus, that invaded her thoughts at the most inappropriate moments. You're not wrong, she admitted, her voice trembling but honest. Something changed in his expression. The last trace of control disappeared. He closed his eyes for a second, his jaw tense, as if fighting an internal battle. When he opened them again, there was a decision in them. Dinner tonight, he said, his voice rough. It's not going to be at a restaurant. Charlotte blinked. It's not. No, it'll be at my penthouse. He paused, his eyes fixed on hers. Because I need privacy to tell you things no one else can hear, things about who I really am. Her heart raced. That scares me. It should, Bruce admitted. But I promise you one thing, Charlotte. You'll be safe, always, with me. He finally pulled away, creating space between them, but the absence of his warmth was physical, palpable. 8 o'clock, he repeated. My driver will pick you up, but if you want to back out, if this is too much, he held her gaze. I'll understand. Charlotte took a deep breath. Every self-preservation instinct screamed at her to back away, to keep things professional, to not cross that line. But there was something stronger than fear, a curiosity, an attraction, a need to know who the man behind the mask really was. I'll be ready, she said. A smile touched his lips, small but genuine. And in that smile, Charlotte saw something that completely disarmed her. Hope. See you later, Charlotte. See you later, Bruce. She left the office with trembling legs, racing heart, spinning mind. When she returned to her desk, she realized she had completely forgotten the reason he'd called her in. But it didn't matter, because at 8 o'clock, her life would change forever. Charlotte looked at the clock for the 10th time in 5 minutes, 7:43, 17 minutes. She had 17 minutes before everything changed. Her apartment, a modest studio in Brooklyn, had never felt so small. She'd tried on 5 different dresses, each one discarded for reasons that now seemed ridiculous. Too formal, too casual, too daring, too conservative. In the end, she chose a simple black dress that ended just above the knees, with 3/4 sleeves and a discreet but elegant neckline. Classic. Safe. Or at least that's what she was trying to convince herself. Her phone buzzed on the vanity. A message. "I'm at the door." Charlotte felt her stomach flip. 7:52. He was early. Or maybe just as anxious as she was. She grabbed her small clutch, checked her lipstick one last time in the mirror, a soft wine shade that was neither too much nor too little, and took a deep breath. Then, before she could change her mind, she opened the door. The driver was there, a middle-aged man in a dark suit with a professional expression. He nodded respectfully. "Good evening, Miss Hayes. Mr. Ashford is waiting for you." Charlotte went down the stairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. The car, an immaculate black Mercedes, was parked by the curb, its dark windows reflecting the streetlights. The driver opened the back door, and there he was. Bruce was sitting in the back seat, his suit replaced by a white shirt with sleeves rolled up to his elbows and dark pants. Simple. But somehow, it made him even more magnetic. His hair was slightly tousled, as if he'd run his hands through it several times. When he saw Charlotte, his eyes lit up. "You came," he said, and there was genuine relief in his voice. "Did you think I wouldn't?" Charlotte asked as she got into the car, the driver gently closing the door behind her. "I hoped, but I wasn't sure." Bruce watched her for a moment, his eyes traveling over her face with that intensity that had already become familiar. "You look beautiful." She felt warmth rise to her cheeks. "Thank you." The car began to move, gliding smoothly through the streets of Brooklyn toward Manhattan. A comfortable silence settled between them. It wasn't uncomfortable, but loaded with expectation. "Nervous?" Bruce asked after a few minutes. "Should I lie?" Charlotte responded with a small smile. He laughed, a low, genuine sound she rarely heard at the office. "No. Never lie to me, Charlotte, even if the truth is difficult." She really looked at him then. In the dim light of the car's interior, he seemed different, less guarded. His shoulders were relaxed, but there was tension in the way he held his own hands. "You're nervous too," she observed. "Terrified," Bruce admitted, meeting her eyes. "Because what I'm going to tell you today might make you run, and I don't know if I'm ready for that." Charlotte's heart raced. "Then why are you doing this?" He leaned slightly toward her, closing the distance between them. His scent, that woody cologne that haunted her, enveloped her like an embrace. "Because I've spent too long living halfway, hiding who I am. And you." He paused, his eyes shining with something intense. "You make me want to be completely honest for the first time in my life." His words hit her like a wave. Charlotte didn't know what to say, so she simply held his gaze, letting the silence speak for her. The car crossed the bridge, Manhattan's lights shining like earthbound stars. They drove up the island until they reached an elegant building on the Upper East Side, all glass and steel, imposing against the night sky. The driver stopped at the private entrance. Bruce got out first and extended his hand to Charlotte. When their fingers touched, it was like completing a circuit. Electricity coursed through her entire body. They entered the private elevator, and Bruce typed in a code. The doors closed, and the cabin began to rise smoothly. Charlotte could feel his proximity, the heat emanating from his body, the way he watched her through the elevator mirror's reflection. "What do you know about me?" Bruce asked suddenly. Charlotte blinked, surprised by the question. "You're the CEO of Ashford Enterprises. You built an empire in 10 years. You're powerful." "True," he agreed, "but incomplete." The elevator stopped on the top floor. The doors opened directly into a spacious foyer, with light marble floors and modern art on the walls. Bruce guided her inside, his hand still holding hers. The penthouse was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a 360-degree view of Manhattan, the city lights twinkling like diamonds. The decor was masculine but elegant, shades of grey, black and navy blue, with touches of dark wood and brushed steel. "Wow," Charlotte murmured, releasing his hand to walk to the windows. Bruce watched her, hands in his pockets. "You like it? It's breathtaking." She turned to him. But it's also lonely. Something passed through his eyes. Recognition, perhaps even pain. It is. It has been. He walked to the bar on the side of the room and poured 2 glasses of red wine. He brought one to her, their fingers touching briefly as she accepted it. "There's something I need to tell you before dinner," Bruce began, his voice serious. "Something about who I really am." Charlotte took a sip of wine, trying to calm her nerves. "I'm listening." Bruce took a deep breath. He led her to the wide sofa facing the windows, but didn't sit. Instead, he stood, looking out at the city as if seeking courage in the lights. "Ashford Enterprises is legitimate, but it's not my only operation." He paused, his shoulders tense. "My family built a different empire, one that operates in the shadows." Charlotte's heart beat harder. "What do you mean?" He finally turned to her, and there was a raw vulnerability on his face that left her breathless. "I'm the heir to an organization that controls much of New York's underworld. Protection, information, influence. It's not legal, but it's powerful. And it's my legacy." The silence that followed was heavy. Charlotte processed his words, the wine forgotten in her hand. She should be scared. She should be planning an exit. But all she felt was a burning curiosity. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, her voice surprisingly calm. "Because if we're going to move forward, if there's any chance of something real between us, you need to know." He took a step toward her. "My world isn't safe, Charlotte. It's dark, complicated, dangerous. And yet, you're bringing me into it?" "I'm giving you a choice," Bruce corrected. "You can leave now, and none of this will have consequences for you. Or," he knelt in front of her, his eyes level with hers, "you can stay, get to know my world, understand who I really am, and then decide." Charlotte looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the powerful man, yes, but she also saw the vulnerable man, the man who had just exposed his most dangerous secret because he wanted to be honest with her. "1 week," Bruce said softly. "Give me 1 week. After that, if you want to leave, I'll let you go. No questions, no consequences." "And if I stay?" Charlotte whispered. His eyes gleamed. "Then everything changes." She placed her glass on the side table and held his face between her hands. The touch made his eyes close for a brief moment. 1 week, she agreed. And when he opened his eyes again, there was promise in them. Dinner was served at an elegant table by the panoramic windows. Candles flickered softly between white porcelain plates, creating dancing shadows that played with the contours of Bruce's face. Charlotte barely touched her food. Grilled salmon with fine herbs, vegetables roasted in truffle oil. Not because it wasn't delicious, but because her mind was somewhere else entirely. They talked about superficial things at first, favorite places in New York, movies they'd seen recently, books that had marked their lives. But beneath every word, there was an undercurrent of tension, an acute awareness that this night was a point of no return. "For you're thinking about leaving," Bruce observed, setting down his fork. It wasn't a question. Charlotte met his eyes. "I'm thinking about why I'm not thinking about leaving." A smile touched his lips, not the polite CEO smile, but something more genuine, almost sad. "And what's the answer?" She tilted her head, studying him. "I don't know yet, but I think it has to do with the fact that, for the first time since I've known you, you're being real with me." Bruce pushed his plate aside and leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes fixed on her with that intensity that made the air around him vibrate. "You want to know the truth about me?" he asked, his voice low. "The complete truth?" "Yes," Charlotte answered without hesitation. He stood up, extending his hand. "Then come with me." Charlotte accepted his hand, feeling the firmness of his fingers intertwined with hers. He led her through the penthouse to a private office, all dark wood, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, an imposing desk at the center. But he didn't go to the desk. Bruce pressed a discreet panel on the wall, and a section of the shelves slid aside, revealing a large safe made of brushed steel. He typed in a code, placed his hand on the biometric scanner, and the heavy door opened with a soft click. Inside, Charlotte saw organized folders, some artifacts that looked ancient, and a framed photograph of a couple, an elegant, dark-haired woman and a man with a military bearing. My parents, Bruce said, picking up the photo. His voice carried a weight Charlotte had never heard before. Michael and Elena Ashford. They died when I was 23. An attack. We never found out who was responsible. Charlotte touched his arm gently. I'm so sorry. He put the photo back and took out a leather folder. My father built all of this. He was complicated, brilliant, but ruthless. He taught me that power isn't about brute force. It's about information, loyalty, and knowing exactly when to act. Bruce opened the folder, revealing documents, photographs, records. Charlotte saw names she recognized, politicians, businessmen, public figures. Next to each name were detailed notes. This is, she began. Influence, Bruce completed. My father understood something fundamental. Whoever controls information controls the city. He didn't need violence, though sometimes it was necessary. He had something more powerful, secrets. He closed the folder and turned to Charlotte, his eyes dark but honest. When they died, I inherited everything, the legitimate empire and the other one. I had two choices, abandon my family's legacy or embrace it completely. And you chose to embrace it, Charlotte said softly. I chose to survive, Bruce corrected. There are people in this world who would have seen my parents' death as an opportunity. I needed to prove I was as ruthless as my father. Maybe more so. He walked to the office window, hands in his pockets, posture tense. In the first 5 years, I eliminated threats, built alliances, consolidated power, and somewhere in that process, I became exactly what he wanted me to be. Charlotte approached, standing beside him. Below Manhattan glowed, millions of lives, millions of stories, all oblivious to the man who, in a way, had power over many of them. Do you regret it? She asked. Bruce turned his head to look at her. Having power? No. Losing myself in the process? Every day. He turned completely toward her, the raw vulnerability on his face making her heart tighten. You asked me why I'm telling you all of this. The truth, Charlotte, is that when I look at you, I see something I forgot existed. He raised his hand, his fingers brushing the side of her face with a reverence that made her breath catch. Light, genuine goodness, someone who hasn't been corrupted by this world. I'm not perfect, Charlotte whispered. No, but you're real. His eyes searched hers as if looking for salvation. My world is built on masks and lies. Everyone wants something from me. Power, money, protection. But you, he paused, his voice hoarse. You look at me and don't see the CEO or the heir. Josiva, Bruce. Tears burned in Charlotte's eyes. She didn't know what to say, so she simply placed her hand over his, which still rested on her face. I have blood on my hands, Bruce continued, his voice breaking slightly. I've made decisions that keep other people awake at night, built empires on others' mistakes, and I can't undo any of it. I'm not asking you to undo it, Charlotte said softly. I'm here to understand. Something changed in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or hope. Why haven't you run away yet? Charlotte took a deep breath, searching for the right words. Because everyone has shadows, Bruce. You chose to show me yours. That says more about who you are than any mistake you've made. He closed his eyes, his jaw tense, as if fighting against something. When he opened them again, there was an intensity in them that made the air between them vibrate. Charlotte, he murmured, his face inches from hers. If you stay with me, there will be dangers. People who will try to use you against me. Nights when I'll have to leave without explanations. Moments when you'll question whether you made the right choice. I know, she whispered. And you're still considering this? I am. His breath caught. He rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed, as if that simple touch was a relief he didn't know he needed. You're the most real thing that's happened to me in years, he confessed, his voice rough and low. And I'm terrified of ruining this. Of ruining you? Charlotte placed her hands on his chest, feeling his heart beating strong beneath his shirt. You won't ruin me. How can you be so sure? Because, she looked up, meeting his eyes. I see who you really are. And yes, there's darkness. But there's also this. She pressed her palm over his heart. A man who cares so much he's willing to push me away to protect me. That's not darkness, Bruce. That's love. His eyes widened. He said nothing for a long moment, just stared at her as if seeing something impossible, something too precious to be real. Then, slowly, he lowered his head and pressed his lips to her forehead. A gentle kiss, reverent, loaded with unspoken promises. "Stay," he whispered against her skin. "Please, stay with me this week. Let me show you everything, the good, the bad, the impossible." Charlotte closed her eyes, feeling his warmth enveloping her, the sincerity in his words echoing in her heart. "I'll stay." And when he embraced her, holding her as if she were the only thing keeping him from falling apart, Charlotte knew she had just crossed a line from which there was no return, but for the first time she didn't want to go back. They returned to the main room in silence, but it was a different silence now, loaded with mutual understanding, with a connection that had deepened with each revelation. Charlotte sat on the wide sofa facing the windows, Manhattan's lights blinking like silent witnesses to the moment that would change everything. Bruce poured more wine for both of them, but didn't sit down immediately. He stood, looking at her with an expression that mixed desire, fear, and something deeper, something he seemed to be struggling to name. "Before we continue," he began, his voice low and careful, "I need you to understand exactly what it means to spend a week in my world." Charlotte held her wineglass, feeling the weight of the moment. "I'm listening." Bruce finally sat beside her, but maintained a respectful distance, as if afraid that if he touched her now, he'd completely lose control of the conversation. "Tomorrow morning, if you accept, my driver will come get you. You won't go to the office. You'll come with me." He paused, his eyes fixed on hers. "I'm going to introduce you to the people who really run this city, not the politicians you see on television, the real players." Charlotte's heart raced, but she didn't look away. "Who are they?" "My younger brother, Marcus. He handles operations in Brooklyn and Queens. He's protective, loyal to the death, but doesn't trust easily." Bruce took a sip of wine, his eyes becoming distant for a moment. "My chief advisor, Isabella Cortez. She was a corporate lawyer before joining us. Now she solves problems." "What kind of problems?" Charlotte asked, though part of her wasn't sure she wanted the answer. "The kind that can end careers, or worse." He looked at her directly. "I won't lie to you, Charlotte. The people around me do things that cross lines, sometimes out of necessity, sometimes out of loyalty, always for protection." She swallowed hard. "And you expect me to accept that?" "No," Bruce said firmly. "I expect you to see, to understand the context, to know the people behind the actions." He leaned slightly toward her. "You'll have dinner with the family. You'll see meetings. You'll get to know the side of my world I've never shown anyone outside of it." "Why?" Charlotte whispered. "Why show me all of this?" His eyes darkened. "Because if there's any chance at all, of you staying in my life, you need to know what you're getting into. I won't deceive you with half-truths. You deserve the complete story before you decide." Charlotte placed her glass on the table, her hands trembling slightly. "And if, at the end of the week, I decide it's too much?" The pain that crossed his face was quick but intense. "Then I let you go, without guilt, without pressure, with all the protection I can offer to ensure you're safe." "But you don't want me to go," she observed, more a statement than a question. "No." The word came out like a confession. "But what I want doesn't matter if it means putting you in danger, or forcing you to live a life that makes you unhappy." Charlotte studied him, the way his shoulders were tense as if he were bracing for rejection, the way his fingers gripped the wine glass harder than necessary, the way his eyes watched her, with a vulnerability that contrasted brutally with the powerful man he was. "You're giving me an out," she said softly. "But at the same time, you're asking me to stay." "I am," Bruce admitted, setting his glass aside and turning completely toward her. "Because selfishly, I want you in my life. But not at the cost of your peace, not at the cost of who you are." He raised his hand, hesitated for a moment, then gently touched her face. His thumb traced the line of her cheekbone with a reverence that made her heart tighten. "Charlotte, in recent years I've built walls so high I forgot what it feels like to feel something real. And then you showed up with that damn smile and everything crumbled." His voice grew hoarse. "You make me want to be better, Not just powerful, better. Tears burned in her eyes. "Bruce, 1 week," he repeated, his forehead tilting to touch hers. 7 days. I show you everything. The elegant dinners and the shadowy meetings. The loyal people and the constant threats. The luxury and the price we pay for it. He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "On the 7th day I ask you a question, and you give me an answer. No pressure, no manipulation, just honesty." Charlotte's heart beat so hard she was certain he could hear it. Every rational instinct screamed at her to say no, to return to her simple, safe life, to not get involved with a world that could destroy her. But there was something stronger than fear. A burning curiosity, an attraction that went beyond the physical, a connection she'd never felt before and knew somehow she would never feel again. "What question?" she whispered. His eyes gleamed. "You'll know when the time comes." Charlotte took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision pressing against her chest. She looked around. The luxurious penthouse, the stunning view, the life of power and danger Bruce was offering. Then she looked back at him, at the man who had exposed his soul, who offered her truth when lies would have been easier, who looked at her as if she were the only real thing in a world of illusions. 1 week, Charlotte said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "But with one condition." His eyes widened slightly. "What?" "Total honesty, no secrets. If I'm going to know your world, I need the truth, all of it, even if it hurts." A slow smile formed on his lips, not the polite smile she knew from the office, but something genuine, almost relieved. "Deal." He extended his hand formally, but there was something intimate about the gesture. Charlotte placed her hand in his, feeling the firmness, the warmth, the silent promise in the grip. But instead of shaking and releasing, Bruce intertwined his fingers with hers, gently pulling her closer. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice rough, "for giving me this chance." "Don't thank me yet," Charlotte said with a small smile. "I might run away on day 3. "If you do," Bruce responded, his eyes shining with something that looked like humor and desire mixed together, "I'll respect it. But I'll spend the rest of my life wondering, what if?" She laughed softly, the tension breaking for a moment. But then his eyes darkened again, the atmosphere shifting. "Charlotte," he said, his voice low and intense, "before we start tomorrow, I need you to know something." "What?" He raised his free hand and touched her face again, his thumb tracing the contour of her lips with torturous slowness. "No matter what happens this week, no matter what you see or learn about me, you'll always be safe. I protect what's mine. And you," he paused, his eyes fixed on hers, "you're already mine even if you don't know it yet." The air left her lungs. It wasn't possession in his voice, it was promise, protection, something deep and primal that made every nerve in her body awaken. "I don't belong to anyone," she said, but her voice came out shaky. "Not yet," Bruce agreed, a smile touching his lips. "But by the end of this week, you'll want to." The audacity of the statement should have annoyed her. But instead, it sent a wave of heat through her that caught her completely off guard. "Confident," she managed to say. "Hopeful," he corrected, his forehead tilting against hers again. "Desperately hopeful." They stayed like that for a long moment, foreheads together, breaths mingling, hearts beating in an uncoordinated rhythm that somehow felt perfectly right. Then Bruce pulled away, though it seemed to cost him a physical effort. "It's late. You should go home. Rest." "And tomorrow?" Charlotte asked. "Tomorrow," he said, his eyes shining with promise, "everything begins." The black Mercedes stopped in front of Charlotte's apartment at exactly 9 in the morning. She'd spent the night awake, alternating between excitement and panic, mentally rehearsing all the ways this week could go wrong. But when she went downstairs and saw Bruce waiting inside the car, wearing an impeccable grey suit and that look that completely undid her, all fears dissipated. "Good morning," he said, his voice low but loaded with something that made her stomach flip. "Good morning," Charlotte responded, getting into the car. The space between them seemed smaller than the night before, as if gravity had shifted. Bruce didn't touch her, but his eyes traveled over the navy blue dress she'd chosen, elegant but discreet, professional but feminine. "You look beautiful." "Where are we going?" she asked, trying to ignore the heat rising to her cheeks. First, breakfast. Then, he paused, an almost dangerous smile touching his lips. You're going to meet my brother. The restaurant was discreet, hidden on a side street in Tribeca. From outside it looked like an ordinary cafe. Inside, it was elegant in a subtle way, tables spaced for privacy, waiters who knew when to disappear, an atmosphere that whispered money without shouting it. Bruce guided her to a corner table, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. The touch was respectful, but sent sparks through her spine. He pulled out the chair for her, an old-fashioned gesture that somehow felt natural coming from him. "Are you always such a gentleman?" Charlotte asked when he sat across from her. "Only with people who matter," Bruce replied, his eyes fixed on her with that intensity that was already becoming addictive. They ordered eggs Benedict for her, an omelette for him, but the food was secondary. What mattered was the way he leaned toward her when he spoke, as if his words were secrets meant only for her ears. The way his eyes lingered on her lips when she talked, the way, occasionally, his hand brushed hers on the table, sending waves of electricity through her. "Tell me something about yourself that no one else knows," Bruce asked suddenly, his voice low. Charlotte blinked, surprised. "Why?" "Because I want to know the real Charlotte, not the impeccable assistant from the office. You—" She hesitated, biting her lower lip, a nervous gesture that made his eyes visibly darken. "I dance. Alone. In my apartment. Music loud. Barefoot. With no one watching." A genuine smile lit up his face. "Why alone?" "Because when I dance, I don't have to be perfect. I can just be." She looked at him. "Your turn. Tell me something no one knows." Bruce was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee cup. Then, "I'm afraid of silence. That's why I sleep with music playing. Because in the silence I hear things I'd rather forget." The vulnerability in the admission made her heart tighten. Charlotte reached out and touched his fingers on the table. He turned his palm up, intertwining his fingers with hers, and they stayed like that, connected by something deeper than desire. After breakfast, Bruce took her to an industrial building in Brooklyn. From outside it looked abandoned. Inside it was an elegant club. Modern decor, marble bar, a private area surrounded by frosted glass where men in suits talked in low tones. "This is Marcus's territory," Bruce explained, his hand still on the small of her back guiding her. "He can be intimidating, but he's loyal." A man approached, younger than Bruce, maybe by a few years, with the same bone structure but lighter eyes, almost grey. He wore dark jeans and a black shirt, his posture relaxed but alert. "So this is her," Marcus said, his eyes assessing Charlotte with a frankness that would have been rude if it weren't so direct. "Charlotte, this is Marcus, my brother." Bruce didn't release Charlotte, keeping her close as if marking territory. "Pleasure," Charlotte said, extending her hand. Marcus shook it, firm but not brutal. "He told you everything?" "I'm learning," Charlotte answered honestly. A smile touched Marcus's lips. "Honest. I like that." He looked at Bruce. "She's different from the others." "I know," Bruce said simply, his eyes meeting Charlotte's for a loaded moment. They spent an hour there, Charlotte observing while Bruce and Marcus discussed business, nothing specific in front of her, but she caught fragments, territories, alliances, threats. The way men spoke to Bruce with reverent respect. The way Marcus, despite his informality, clearly saw him as leader. When they left, Bruce pulled her into an empty side corridor before they reached the car. The change was sudden. One moment they were walking, the next she was gently pressed against the wall, his hands on either side of her head, trapping her without touching her. "Are you okay?" he asked, his face inches from hers. "Yes," Charlotte whispered, her heart racing. "Are you sure? Because I can see in your eyes that you're processing a lot." "I am," she admitted. "But I'm not afraid." His eyes gleamed. "You should be. I should scare you." "But you don't," Charlotte said, raising her hand to touch his face. Her fingers traced the line of his jaw, feeling the roughness of his stubble. "You're dangerous." "But not to me." Something broke in him. Bruce closed his eyes, his forehead tilting against hers, his breathing becoming irregular. "Charlotte, you have no idea what you're doing to me." "Then show me." she whispered. He opened his eyes, and what she saw there left her breathless. Raw desire, barely contained, mixed with something deeper. Bruce raised his hand, his fingers sliding along her neck, his thumb tracing the line of her collarbone exposed by the dress's neckline. "If I show you," he murmured, his voice hoarse. "There's no going back." "Who said I want to go back?" His control faltered. For a fraction of a second, Charlotte saw the exact moment his restraint snapped. Then Bruce pulled her close, one hand sliding to her waist, the other moving up to hold the nape of her neck, fingers intertwining in her hair. "You're killing me," he confessed against her lips, so close she could feel every word. "Every look, every touch, every time you look at me like I'm more than all of this." "You are more," Charlotte said, her hands moving up to his chest, feeling his heart beating wildly beneath his impeccable suit. Bruce tilted his head, his lips brushing the corner of her mouth, her jaw the sensitive spot just below her ear. It wasn't a kiss. It was a promise of what was to come, and every touch left fire in its wake. "Bruce," she breathed, her hands gripping his waist. "Say my name like that again," he murmured against her skin, "and I'll kiss you right here, not caring who sees." Charlotte felt her legs weaken. She should pull back, maintain some dignity, but she couldn't. She didn't want to. "Bruce," she repeated, this time louder, more deliberate. He groaned low, a guttural sound that came from somewhere deep. For a moment, Charlotte was certain he would follow through on the threat. But then, with visible effort, Bruce pulled back, creating space between them, though his hand still held her waist as if he couldn't let go completely. "Not here," he said, his voice strained. "When I really kiss you, Charlotte, it's going to be somewhere I won't have to stop." The words sent heat through her. "Is that a promise?" His eyes gleamed dangerously. "It's a vow." They returned to the car in silence, but the tension between them was palpable, a rope stretched to its limit, ready to snap at the slightest touch. Bruce kept his hand in hers the entire ride, his thumb tracing circles on her palm, a simple touch that was somehow more intimate than any kiss. "Where to now?" Charlotte asked, her voice hoarse. Bruce turned his head to look at her, and what she saw in his eyes made her tremble. "Home. My home. Because I can't stand being around you with other people anymore." And as Manhattan passed by the windows, Charlotte knew she was about to cross another line, one from which there would be no return, and she couldn't wait. The next 3 days passed like a whirlwind. Charlotte met more people from Bruce's world, men and women who operated in New York's shadows, each with their own story, their own loyalty. She dined at private restaurants, watched meetings in locked rooms, saw Bruce command with an authority that was both fascinating and intimidating. But it was the moments between meetings that marked her. The way Bruce found reasons to touch her, a hand on the small of her back when entering a room, fingers brushing hers when passing a document, a look that lingered a second longer than necessary. Each touch was loaded with an unfulfilled promise. Each glance contained volumes of unspoken words. On the 4th night, Bruce took her to dinner at an exclusive Italian restaurant in the West Village. The place was small, intimate, with only 10 tables and a waiting list of months. But when Bruce Ashford arrived, doors opened. They sat at a table in the back, partially hidden by a carved wooden divider. Candles flickered between them, creating shadows that played on the contours of his face. Bruce had removed his jacket, the sleeves of his white shirt rolled up to his elbows, revealing strong forearms that Charlotte caught herself admiring more times than she should. "You're quiet," he observed, pouring red wine into their glasses. "I'm thinking," Charlotte replied, accepting the glass. "About what?" She studied him for a moment. "About how all of this feels unreal. 4 days ago, you were my boss, distant, untouchable, and now—" She paused, searching for the right words. "And now?" Bruce encouraged, his eyes fixed on her with that intensity that made the air feel thinner. "Now you're the most real person I know," Charlotte admitted softly. Something changed in his expression, a vulnerability he rarely showed. He extended his hand across the table, palm up, an invitation. Charlotte intertwined her fingers with his, and they stayed like that, connected while the restaurant buzzed around them in a distant murmur. "Charlotte," Bruce began, his voice low and serious, "I need to tell you something. Her heart raced at the tone. "What? I—" The sound was deafening. Glass shattering, screams, the unmistakable sound of gunshots piercing the air. Everything happened in fractions of a second, but for Charlotte it seemed like an eternity in slow motion. Bruce moved with a speed she didn't know he possessed, flipping the table, pulling her from her seat, covering her body with his as more glass exploded around them. "Stay down," he ordered, his voice firm but urgent. This wasn't the CEO speaking. This was the leader, the protector, the man accustomed to danger. Charlotte was trembling, her heart beating so hard she was certain it would burst from her chest. But under Bruce's body, she felt strangely safe. He was solid, warm, an unbreakable shield between her and the chaos. The shots stopped as abruptly as they began. Silence. Then hysterical screams from other customers, the sound of sirens in the distance. Bruce lifted his head carefully, his eyes sweeping the restaurant in a quick, calculated assessment. Then he looked down at Charlotte beneath him, his hands still protecting her head. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice tense. I don't know," Charlotte managed to say, her voice shaking. Bruce examined her quickly, efficiently, his hands running over her arms, searching for injuries. He stopped when he saw blood on her forearm, a superficial cut from a shard of glass. "Shit," he muttered, his jaw tightening. Then, without waiting, he pulled the handkerchief from his pocket and pressed it against the cut, applying firm but gentle pressure. Men in suits appeared, Bruce's security, which Charlotte hadn't realized was there. They spoke in rapid codes, updates on threats, safe exit routes. "Get her to the car. Now," Bruce ordered. "What about you?" Charlotte asked, gripping his shirt. His eyes softened as he looked at her. "I'll be right behind you. I promise." One of the guards, a large man named Daniel, whom Charlotte had met the day before, extended his hand. "Miss Hayes, please." Charlotte didn't want to let go of Bruce, but the expression on his face left no room for argument. She let Daniel guide her through the back of the restaurant, past terrified cooks and crouching waiters. The Mercedes was waiting in the alley, engine running. Daniel placed her inside, sliding in beside her, alert and tense. 2 minutes later, which felt like hours, Bruce entered the car, slamming the door shut. "Drive," he said to the driver, his voice sharp. The car took off at high speed, navigating Manhattan's side streets with a precision that suggested practice. Charlotte was shaking uncontrollably now, the adrenaline beginning to fade, leaving shock in its place. Bruce pulled her close, wrapping her in his arms, one hand stroking her hair. "It's okay. You're safe. I promise. It's okay." "What was that?" she managed to ask against his chest. "A message," Bruce said, his voice dark. "Someone wanting my attention. They could have killed you. They could have killed us. They weren't going to." He kissed the top of her head, an instinctive, comforting gesture. "If they wanted to kill me, they would have shot directly at us. This was intimidation." Charlotte pulled back enough to look at him. "And does it work? Are you intimidated?" A cold smile touched his lips. "No. I'm furious." They went straight to the penthouse. Bruce didn't let go of her hand the entire elevator ride, his fingers intertwined with hers like a lifeline. When the doors opened, he guided her inside, finally releasing her, only to lock the door and activate a security system Charlotte didn't know existed. "Sit," he said, pointing to the couch. Charlotte obeyed, still trembling. Bruce disappeared for a moment and returned with a first aid kit. He knelt in front of her, taking her arm carefully and removing the makeshift handkerchief. "This is going to sting," he warned before cleaning the cut with antiseptic. Charlotte bit her lip but didn't complain. She watched as he worked, focused, gentle, his fingers firm but delicate. When he finished applying a clean bandage, he didn't release her arm immediately. "I'm sorry," he said softly, his eyes fixed on the wound. "It wasn't your fault." "It was." He finally looked up, and the guilt on his face hit her like a punch. "I put you in danger, exactly what I promised I wouldn't do." Charlotte placed her free hand on his face, forcing him to look at her. "Bruce, you protected me. Without hesitation, you put your own body between me and danger. And yet you still got hurt." A scratch, she insisted. Nothing more. He closed his eyes, his jaw tightening. When he opened them again, there was something darker there, something primal and possessive. If something had happened to you... He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. Charlotte slid from the chair to the floor, kneeling in front of him, their faces level. But it didn't. I'm here. I'm fine. Bruce pulled her to him abruptly, his arms wrapping around her tightly, his face buried in her neck. Charlotte felt his body tremble, not from fear, but from something deeper. Relief. Need. I can't lose you, he murmured against her skin, his voice hoarse. Not now. Not when I've finally found you. Charlotte wrapped her arms around him, holding him just as tightly. You won't lose me. They stayed like that for long minutes, kneeling on the floor of the luxurious penthouse, clinging to each other as if the entire world had collapsed, and they were all that remained. Eventually Bruce pulled back, his hands framing her face, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that left her breathless. Come with me, he said. Where? To bed. Just to sleep. I need to have you close. I need to know you're safe. There was nothing inappropriate about the request. It was pure need, a raw vulnerability he was exposing. Charlotte nodded, letting him guide her through the penthouse to a master bedroom she hadn't seen yet. It was masculine but elegant, shades of grey and navy blue, an enormous bed dominating the space, floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of Manhattan. Bruce gave her one of his shirts to wear, leaving the room while she changed. When Charlotte slipped under the sheets, soft as clouds, Bruce returned wearing only pajama pants. The sight of his bare torso, defined muscles, and a scar that crossed his ribs made the air escape her lungs. He lay down beside her, but maintained a respectful distance. For a moment they stayed like that, and lying on their sides, looking at each other across the space between them. Thank you, Bruce said softly, for not running away. Where would I go? Charlotte whispered. He extended his hand, fingers brushing her face. You still have 3 days. You can still change your mind. Charlotte took his hand, intertwining their fingers. I won't change it. And there, in the darkness of his bedroom, with Manhattan glowing outside and the ghosts of danger still echoing, Charlotte finally understood. She wasn't just getting to know Bruce's world. She was falling in love with him. Charlotte woke to soft morning light filtering through the curtains. For a moment, disoriented, she didn't know where she was. Then memory returned. The gunshots, the fear, Bruce protecting her with his own body. And now, the reality. She was in his bed. She turned her head and found Bruce awake, lying on his side, watching her. His eyes were calm, but there was an intensity in them that made her heart race. How long have you been awake? She asked, her voice hoarse with sleep. A while, he admitted. I couldn't stop looking at you. Charlotte felt heat rise to her cheeks. That's kind of creepy. A smile touched his lips. Sorry, it's just, you look peaceful when you sleep, like the world can't touch you. She reached out, touching his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. How is your world this morning? His expression darkened. Handled. Marcus identified who was behind the attack. They won't try again. Charlotte didn't ask what handled meant. Part of her didn't want to know. Part of her already knew. Do you regret it? Bruce asked suddenly. Staying? No, Charlotte answered honestly. Should I? Probably. He rolled onto his back, looking at the ceiling. But I'm too selfish to encourage you to leave. Charlotte turned on her side, propping herself up on her elbow to look at him. The morning light highlighted every angle of his face, the strong line of his jaw, the surprisingly long lashes, the mouth she'd imagined on her lips more times than she should admit. Bruce, she said softly. He turned his head, his eyes meeting hers. Yes? Stop giving me reasons to leave. Because I don't want to. Something changed in his expression, surprise perhaps, or hope. He turned completely toward her, mirroring her position, their faces inches apart. What do you want, Charlotte? He asked, his voice hoarse. She knew what he was really asking. And for the first time since this all began, she was ready to answer with complete honesty. You, she whispered, I want you. His eyes widened, his breath catching. Charlotte. No, she interrupted, placing her fingers over his lips. "I know what you're going to say, that it's dangerous, that you'll hurt me, that I deserve better." She removed her fingers, replacing them with her palm against his face. "But what if I don't want better? What if I just want you?" Bruce closed his eyes, as if in pain. "You don't know what you're asking for. Then show me." His eyes opened, and what she saw there made her tremble. Pure desire, unfiltered, mixed with something deeper, more frightening. Love. "If I touch you now," Bruce murmured, his voice strained, "I won't be able to stop." "Who asked you to stop?" His control shattered. With one fluid movement, Bruce pulled her close, one hand sliding to the nape of her neck, fingers intertwining in her hair, the other wrapping around her waist. For one infinite moment he just held her like that, their faces so close, their breaths mingled. "Last chance," he whispered against her lips. "Bruce," Charlotte responded, his name a plea and a promise. "Kiss me." And then he did. The kiss wasn't gentle. It was hunger. It was months of restraint breaking all at once. His lips captured hers with an intensity that stole the air from her lungs, his hand at her nape, pulling her even closer as his mouth moved against hers with desperate urgency. Charlotte moaned softly, her hands sliding to his bare chest, feeling his heart beating wildly beneath her palms. Bruce deepened the kiss, his tongue exploring, savoring, claiming. It was devastating. It was perfect. He rolled, placing her beneath him, but keeping his weight on his elbows so as not to crush her. He broke the kiss, only to look at her, his eyes dark with desire. "You're so beautiful," he murmured, his fingers tracing the contour of her face, moving down her neck, stopping at her collarbone. "So perfect." "I'm not perfect," Charlotte whispered. "To me, you are." He kissed her forehead, then her temple, her cheekbone, the line of her jaw. Each kiss was an adoration, a silent promise. Charlotte arched against him, her hands exploring his back, feeling the muscles contracting under her touch. Bruce groaned low, the sound vibrating against her skin. "Charlotte," he breathed against her neck. "If you want me to stop, say so now." "Don't stop," she whispered. "Please don't stop." Bruce raised his head, his eyes searching hers. "Are you sure?" In response, Charlotte pulled his face down, kissing him with all the passion and certainty she felt. She felt the moment his last barrier fell, when restraint gave way to complete surrender. His hands began to explore, sliding along the sides of her body over his shirt that she wore, discovering every curve, every sensitive point. When his fingers found the hem of the shirt and began to lift it slowly, Charlotte raised her arms, letting him remove it. Bruce remained still for a moment, just looking at her with a reverence that made tears burn in her eyes. "God, Charlotte, there are no words." He kissed her again, slower this time, savoring. His mouth traveled down her neck, her shoulders, her collarbone, each kiss leaving fire in its wake. His hands followed, tracing invisible patterns on her skin with a delicacy that contrasted with the intensity of desire in his eyes. Charlotte let her hands wander over his body too, exploring every muscle, every scar, memorizing the texture of his skin. When her fingers slid along the waistline of his pants, Bruce groaned, capturing her hand. "Slowly," he murmured, kissing her fingers. "I want to savor every moment." And he did. Every touch was deliberate, every kiss intentional. Bruce explored her body as if it were a sacred map, discovering what made her sigh, what made her gasp, what made her whisper his name. When they finally came together, it was with torturous slowness, eyes fixed on each other, hands intertwined. Charlotte felt tears streaming down her face, not from pain, but from the emotional intensity, from a connection that went far beyond the physical. "Hey," Bruce whispered, wiping away the tears with his thumb. "Am I hurting you?" "No," Charlotte managed to say. It's so much. You're so much." He kissed her gently. "You too. You're everything, Charlotte." They moved together, a rhythm both ancient and new, their bodies learning each other's language. Bruce whispered words against her skin, in English, sometimes in Italian, adorations, promises, confessions. When climax came, it came for both together, a wave that carried them and left them trembling in each other's arms. Breaths intertwined, hearts beating in sync. Afterward, Bruce held her against his chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her back, his chin resting on top of her head. "Stay with me," he whispered in the darkness. "Not just this week, forever. Stay with me, Charlotte." She lifted her head, looking into his eyes. "Are you asking me?" "I'm asking for everything," Bruce interrupted, raw vulnerability on his face. "Your time, your heart, your life. I know it's selfish. I know you deserve more, but I love you, Charlotte, and I can't imagine a day without you." Her heart overflowed. "You love me?" "Since that first smile," he admitted, a smile touching his lips. "Maybe even before. You came into my life like a silent storm and changed everything." Charlotte felt new tears in her eyes. "I love you too." His expression transformed. Amazement, joy, relief. He kissed her deeply, pouring all emotion into the kiss. "Then stay," he murmured against her lips. "Say you'll stay." "I'll stay," Charlotte whispered. "Forever." And there, wrapped in each other as New York's morning awakened outside, they sealed the promise, not with words but with touches, kisses, and the absolute certainty that they had found something rare. They had found true love. In the most unlikely place, with the most unexpected person. And nothing else mattered. The next 2 days were a mixture of discovery and intensity. Charlotte didn't return to her apartment. She stayed with Bruce, and every moment together deepened the connection that had formed that morning. They woke up intertwined, spent afternoons exploring the city as if they were just two ordinary lovers, and the nights were theirs. But the reality of Bruce's world was never far away. On the 6th day, Bruce took her to a meeting he said was important. They drove to a renovated warehouse in Queens. From outside, it looked abandoned. Inside, it was a sophisticated operation. Computers, screens showing security feeds from all over the city, people working in concentrated silence. "This is the brain," Bruce explained, his hand on the small of her back as he guided her. "Where we monitor everything." A woman approached, tall, dark skin, penetrating and intelligent eyes. She wore an impeccable suit and carried a leather briefcase. "Isabella," Bruce said. "This is Charlotte." Isabella extended her hand, the grip firm and assessing. The famous Charlotte. "Bruce talks about nothing else." Charlotte blushed slightly. "Nice to meet you." "The pleasure is mine." Isabella turned to Bruce. "We need to talk, in private." Bruce looked at Charlotte. "Do you mind?" "Go," she said. "I'm fine." He kissed her forehead, a gesture that had already become natural, and followed Isabella to a private room. Charlotte stood there, observing the operation around her. Marcus appeared beside her, hands in his pockets. "Impressive, isn't it?" he said. "It's much more organized than I imagined," Charlotte admitted. Marcus laughed. "What did you expect, men in dark alleys counting dirty money?" "Maybe," she confessed with a small smile. "My brother built this intelligently," Marcus said, his voice becoming serious. He understood that real power doesn't come from brute force but from information and strategy. He looked at her. "And now he's trusting you with this knowledge. That means something." "What does it mean?" "That he sees you as part of this, part of him." Marcus paused. "You understand what that means, right? Once you're in, there's no clean exit." Charlotte's heart raced. "Are you trying to scare me?" "I'm being honest," Marcus replied. "Bruce has been different since you showed up, lighter, more human, and I like that. But you need to understand the weight of this choice." "I understand," Charlotte said, though part of her wondered if she really did. Bruce emerged from the room with Isabella, his expression closed. When he saw Charlotte, his face softened, but there was concern in his eyes. "Everything okay?" she asked when he approached. "Yes, just complications." He took her hand. "Let's get out of here." In the car, Bruce was quiet, his jaw tense, eyes fixed on the window. Charlotte intertwined her fingers with his, waiting. "There's a situation," he said finally, "with one of the rival families. They're testing boundaries. Is it serious?" "It could be." He turned to her, his eyes intense. "Charlotte, I need you to stay at the penthouse for the next few days, with security." "Why? What's going to happen?" "I need to show strength." Make it clear that certain lines can't be crossed. He held her face. And I can't do that if I'm worried about you. Charlotte felt fear tighten her chest, but not from danger, from what Bruce would have to do. Are you going to get hurt? A sad smile touched his lips. It's not the first time I've done this, and it won't be the last. That doesn't comfort me. I know. He kissed her softly. But it's the reality of my world, of our world, if you stay. Back at the penthouse, Bruce was different. He made calls in low tones, gave crisp orders, the transformation from lover to leader happening before Charlotte's eyes. It was fascinating and terrifying. That night, they had dinner in silence. The tension was palpable, a storm cloud forming over them. Afterward, Bruce took her to the penthouse's private terrace, a space Charlotte hadn't seen yet. It was stunning. A rooftop garden with discreet lighting, comfortable furniture, and an unobstructed view of Manhattan glowing like an ocean of stars. It's beautiful here, Charlotte said, leaning against the railing. Bruce stood behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. I come here when I need to think, when the weight of everything gets too heavy. And is it heavy now? Yes, but for different reasons. He turned her in his arms, his eyes searching hers. Charlotte, tomorrow I'm going to handle this situation. And after, he paused, taking a deep breath. After, I want to ask you a question. Her heart raced. What question? It'll be the 7th day, he said softly. The end of the week we promised each other. And I need to know, after seeing everything, getting to know this world, do you still want to be part of it? Charlotte held his face between her hands. Bruce, I already made my choice. Yesterday, when I said I loved you. I know, but I want you to be absolutely certain. His voice was loaded with emotion, because if you stay, I'm going to ask for more than love. I'm going to ask for total commitment, marriage, a life with me, with everything that implies. Tears burned in her eyes. You're saying... I'm saying I want to make you my wife, officially, completely. He kissed her forehead. But only if that's what you want too. Charlotte felt her chest tighten, not from fear, but from pure emotion. Bruce, don't answer now, he interrupted. Tomorrow night when I get back, I'll ask you for real. And you give me your answer. No pressure, no expectations. They stood there, embraced under New York's stars, the future hovering between them like an unspoken promise. Later in bed, Bruce held her with an intensity that bordered on desperation. They made love slowly, each touch loaded with meaning, each kiss a declaration. It wasn't just desire. It was temporary farewell. It was a promise of return. It was everything they couldn't say in words. Come back to me, Charlotte whispered against his lips. Always, Bruce promised. You're my reason to come back. The next morning, Charlotte woke up alone. A note was on the pillow beside her, his handwriting elegant and firm. I'll be back before nightfall. There's security on every floor. You're safe. I love you more than words can express. B. Charlotte held the note against her chest, praying he would return whole. Because now, after everything, she couldn't imagine a world without him. The day passed with torturous slowness. Charlotte tried to read, watch TV, anything to distract her mind. But all she could think about was Bruce, where he was, what he was doing, if he was safe. At 5 in the afternoon, her phone buzzed, a message from Bruce. On my way home, get ready. I have an important question. Her heart exploded. He was okay. He was coming back, and she already knew what her answer would be. Charlotte ran to the bedroom, choosing a simple but elegant dress, dark blue, which she knew he loved. She fixed her hair, applied perfume, checked her reflection 1,000 times. At 6:30 she heard the penthouse door open, firm footsteps crossing the living room. Then Bruce appeared in the bedroom doorway. He was impeccable, dark suit, perfect tie, but there was an intensity in his eyes that made the air leave her lungs. "Hi," she said, her voice trembling. "Hi," Bruce replied, a smile touching his lips. "You look beautiful. Are you okay too?" "I am. Everything's resolved." He walked to her, taking her hands. "Charlotte, it's the 7th day." "I know. And I have a question." "I know," she repeated, her heart beating so hard she was certain he could hear it. Bruce smiled, that genuine smile she loved. "Then come with me. There's a place I need to show you first." And as he guided her through the penthouse, Charlotte knew her life was about to change forever, and she couldn't wait. The car glided through Manhattan's streets as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Charlotte sat beside Bruce, her hand intertwined with his, the silence between them loaded with anticipation. "Where are we going?" she asked softly. Bruce turned his head, his eyes meeting hers. "To the only place where I can ask this question the right way." They left the city behind, driving north for about 40 minutes until they reached an old cemetery in Westchester. The evening light bathed the headstones in a golden glow, creating an atmosphere of solemn peace. Bruce got out of the car and opened the door for Charlotte, offering his hand. She accepted, feeling the firmness of his fingers around hers. Together, they walked along a stone path to a more secluded section, where two black marble headstones stood side by side. Michael James Ashford, 1962, 2015, leader, father, visionary. Elena Rose. Ashford, 1965, 2015, beloved wife and mother. Charlotte felt Bruce's hand tighten around hers. He stood there looking at his parents' graves, his face a mask of contained emotions. "I don't come here often," he admitted, his voice low. "It's difficult, but when I do, it's always for important moments, decisions that change everything." Charlotte remained silent, giving him space to continue. "My father taught me about power, about control, about never showing weakness." Bruce paused, his eyes still fixed on the headstones. "But my mother, she taught me about love, about loyalty, about protecting those who matter no matter the cost." He finally looked at Charlotte, and the vulnerability in his face hit her like a wave. "When they died, I promised I would honor both legacies, that I would be strong, but not heartless, powerful, but not without love." He held both her hands. "And then you showed up, Charlotte, and for the first time since I lost them, I felt like I could have both, could be who they wanted me to be." Tears burned in her eyes. "Bruce." "Wait," he interrupted gently. "Let me do this right." And then, to Charlotte's complete surprise, Bruce knelt down. There, in the cemetery where his parents rested, with the evening sky witnessing the moment, he pulled a small velvet box from his jacket's inner pocket. Charlotte's heart stopped. "Charlotte Hayes," Bruce began, his voice firm but emotional. "I've spent the last 10 years of my life building an empire, accumulating power, protecting a legacy. But in all those years, I never knew what it really meant to be alive." He opened the box, revealing a stunning ring, a solitaire diamond surrounded by blue sapphires, set in platinum. It was elegant, timeless, perfect. "Until you," Bruce continued, his eyes fixed on hers. "You walked into my life with that smile and changed everything. You saw me, not the CEO, not the leader, not the empire, just me. And you loved me anyway." Tears flowed freely down Charlotte's face now. "This week I showed you the worst of me, the dangers, the darkness, the impossible choices, and you stayed." His voice broke slightly. "You stayed, Charlotte, when any sensible person would have run." He took a deep breath, composing himself. "So I'm here, in the most sacred place I know, before the people I loved most before you, asking the most important question of my life." Bruce held her free hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Charlotte, I know my world is complicated. I know there will be difficult nights, impossible decisions, moments when you'll question everything, but I promise, with every part of my being, that I will protect you. I will honor you. I will love you every day of my life." He paused, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "Marry me, Charlotte. Not just as my wife, but as my partner, my equal, the person I want to build something new with, something better than everything that came before. Marry me and let me spend the rest of my life proving you made the right choice." The silence that followed was loaded, sacred. Charlotte looked at the man kneeling before her, powerful, vulnerable, completely exposed, and felt her heart overflow. "Yes," she whispered, her voice broken with emotion. Yes, Bruce. 1,000 times yes. His expression transformed. Relief, joy, pure love flooding his face. With slightly trembling hands, he took the ring from the box and slid it onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made specifically for her. Bruce stood up, pulling her into his arms and kissing her with an intensity that stole the air from her lungs. It was a kiss of promise, of gratitude, of absolute love. When they finally separated, both were laughing and crying at the same time. "You've made me the happiest man in the world," Bruce murmured against her forehead. "You've made me the most loved woman," Charlotte replied, her fingers tracing his face. They stayed there for a few more minutes, embraced before the graves. Charlotte imagined that somehow Bruce's parents were witnessing this moment, blessing the union. When they finally returned to the car, the sky had darkened completely, stars beginning to appear. Bruce drove back to the city, but this time the atmosphere was different, lighter, full of possibilities. "When do you want to get married?" he asked, a smile playing on his lips. Charlotte laughed. "You don't waste time, do you?" "I spent 10 years waiting for you," Bruce replied. "I don't want to waste another day." "Then soon," Charlotte said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "It doesn't have to be something big. It just has to be us." He brought her hand to his lips, kissing the ring. "Perfect. Like you." Back at the penthouse, they went up to the terrace where they'd been the night before. But now, the space was transformed. Candles glowed everywhere, creating a path of light. A small table was set with chilled champagne and strawberries. "You planned this?" Charlotte asked, amazed. "Hopefully," Bruce admitted, pulling her close. "I couldn't imagine you saying no, but if you did, well, at least we'd have champagne to drown my sorrows." Charlotte laughed, hugging him tight. "Idiot." "You're idiot," he corrected, kissing the top of her head. They toasted under the stars, Manhattan glowing around them like a sea of promises. Bruce held her as they looked out at the city, both knowing their lives had changed irrevocably. "Charlotte," Bruce said softly, "thank you." "For what?" "For making me believe I can have both. The power and the love, the darkness and the light." He turned her in his arms, his eyes fixed on hers. "For making me believe I can be better." "You were always good, Bruce," Charlotte said, touching his face. "How you just needed someone to remind you." He kissed her again, soft and deep, pouring every emotion that words couldn't express. And there, under New York's sky, two worlds became one. Later that night, lying together in bed, Bruce traced lazy patterns on Charlotte's bare back, his fingers memorizing every curve. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life making you happy," he promised. "You already are," Charlotte replied, turning to look at him. "Since that first moment in the boardroom when you really looked at me, you already were." Bruce smiled, that rare, genuine smile that was reserved only for her. That smile, it was all that damn smile's fault. "Good to know I have that power over you," Charlotte teased. "You have all the power over me," Bruce said, completely serious. "You always have, from the beginning." They fell asleep intertwined, the engagement ring glowing softly on Charlotte's hand, symbol of a promise made under the stars. And as Manhattan slept outside, two hearts beat in sync, a powerful leader and an ordinary woman who had conquered the impossible. She had conquered his heart, and in the process had saved his soul. The future was uncertain. There would be challenges, dangers, difficult moments. But one thing was absolutely certain. They would face everything together, forever. Sometimes love arrives when we least expect it, disguised as danger, wrapped in secrets, hidden behind an innocent smile that changes everything. Charlotte walked into that boardroom without knowing she was about to awaken something dormant in a powerful man's heart. Bruce lived in the shadows, commanding an empire built on power and control, but it took just one look, one smile, and all his defenses crumbled. She saw beyond the mask. He found light in the darkness. And together they proved that true love doesn't choose safe ground. It flourishes precisely where it seems impossible. Because in the end, the world around us doesn't matter. What matters is the person we choose to have by our side when everything falls apart. And maybe deep down this story is also about us, about the courage to love despite our fears, about choosing someone even when reason tells us to run. If this story touched your heart, Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and become a member to get early access to upcoming stories. And if you felt it was really worth listening to, click the super thanks button too. Your support makes all the difference and helps us keep bringing you stories that move you.